All right, and we are live. Hello, and welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Liberty Down Under, and with me today I've got Gerrie and returning guest CD McRae,
Hey guys.
the birthday girl.
Hey,
Yeah.
CD, happy birthday. Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you. It's been a great day. Thank you.
Fabulous. That's good.
Well,
So we thought we might cover today the recent permanent emergency powers bill that's been put through the Victorian Parliament. When did it pass? Thursday, the lower house.
Yes.
So I guess I might start and cover how we got to this point. So a few weeks ago, that was put through that both houses of Parliament agreed to suspend all members from being at Parliament in person if they didn't hand over proof of vaccination. That got through both houses with unanimous support from the opposition and the government. So Liberal and Labor both supported that bill. It passed almost unanimously in the lower house. I think only one vote against it. In the upper house, it passed 31-4, with 5 abstaining. Those 4 who voted against it were 2 Liberal Democrats, an independent, and the senator from the Shooter, Fisher and Farmer Party. The 2 Lib Dems and the Independents since then have been suspended, and they can't go into Parliament in person to vote. And because you can't vote from home, you have to vote in Parliament. The fourth senator, the guy from SFFP, he handed over his proof of vaccination, so he stayed in Parliament. But then we had this bill, the Permanent Emergency Powers Bill, that was proposed on Tuesday. 121-page document, got passed in 48 hours. Normally it's about 2 weeks for a small bill. That's what I've heard, at least. It's about 2 weeks to discuss it in detail and read it. But it is passed in 48 hours, which is completely ridiculous. Like, there's not time to read it or understand what it means or anything like that. As a result, those 3 who the Independent and 2 Lib Dems have since said they're going to get back to Parliament to fight this bill, because as it stands right now, Labor has the majority with 3 crossbenchers to pass this bill, and they didn't give wide range of powers to the government, especially Dan Andrews, to do basically whatever he wants. It's so bad, in fact, that the Victorian Bar, which is all the barristers, have spoken out against this bill and condemned it for being dictatorial. So I thought we might discuss a few of those provisions from the bill. Anything that really struck you as, concerning in particular, Gerrie?
Well, it's all concerning. But what leapt out at me is when they were talking in section, it's at the start, it's actually in the beginning, in part 2 of 7.3, it's on page 8. It says, at that time, the infectious disease has the ongoing potential to give rise to a pandemic, talking about the powers that the Premier has to decide if an infectious disease, it has the potential to be ongoing, and that, among other things. That struck me because potential, if I was writing a thesis on this, I'd look up the dictionary meaning of potential. It's latent. It's, life is potential. Everything has potential. And in other words, they are intimating that a disease has no end. Well, I mean, all diseases have beginnings and have endings. And I found that it's bizarre as well as being scary. And it's ongoing. It's just, to me, very alarming. That was the first thing. But
I think the fact that the whole potential thing is what really concerns me as well, because it means and in fact, if I'll pull that provision again in a second, but it basically allows them to declare it for potential diseases that haven't even been in Victoria yet.
That's right.
I don't know what section that was, but one of those sections says they can declare it. That it's section 5 says there has been no cases in Victoria for a period of time. Of course, they haven't defined what a period of time means.
Well, that's if they don't define anything.
As a section 5, they can declare a disease a serious risk to public health if the rate of community transmission is low or hasn't even been in Victoria for a period of time.
Yeah.
Well,
you go, CD.
Okay. So this is how you get things like the Patriot Act. This is how the Civil War payments to Union soldiers ends up being Social Security, and this is how it starts. Is language like this, and I realize this is Victoria and not all of Australia, but they don't ever give power back.
No.
So
no, they never have.
No. So this is a framework for something that in perpetuity will it'll just keep going, and like you said, with all this vague language of defining who defines a pandemic, who do you get that information from, and it looks like he can just decide, right? So now he's a scientist, and I mean, not that we follow science anyway, but like now he can decide, like he's the one to decide that. Okay, what else can he decide then? And then
that's right.
It doesn't come back. It does not come back.
The slippery slope, that's the argument. But one man given that authority, and all through this bill, it says that it's whatever he deems reasonable, or whether he decides that the risk now is not that high to either call it or cease it. To give one man in a so-called liberal democracy that amount of power, and more the ability to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, again, if you're not a scientist, who decides that? And that, to me, so you guys are going to end up with, a Dr. Fauci, which I know you guys already have one, but that will be the person who is guiding policy from here on out, that, and it doesn't even have to be a doctor. It doesn't have to be any kind of scientist, whatever it is, right? Like whatever the topic at hand is, if it's weapons of mass destruction, if it's domestic terrorism, if it's, whatever it is, it will be filled in by a person who is not elected that is going to guide that policy, which happens all the time. Like that's not anything new, but that's a lot of reliance on, openly, transparently, open reliance on people who aren't elected.
That's actually interesting, that word transparency, because a couple of weeks prior to this, when they were talking about this bill, they were hailing it as, no, it will be good for Victoria because it will show transparency. Transparency for what is this? Exactly. They're saying that that's how they're using it, as almost like cover for people to say, well, they're being transparent, so now it's okay. No, it's not okay. This bill is horrendous. It is horrendous. It is actually reminiscent to me. Again, everyone knows that I'm a Roman historian, but it is very reminiscent to me of when Sulla in 81 BC was dictator, again, self-declared dictator of the Roman Republic. And now, preface this, brutality plus, we don't live with that level of that sort of brutality, but it's relevant, okay? And he just basically, he published a proscription list of anyone who went against his edicts, rules, laws, punished his enemies and friends, and the people who went on that proscription list, anybody could take them out if they deemed they were going to be a threat to what the aims that Sulla wanted. Now, these were very different because they made him dictator because he was going to restore the traditions of the Republic. But Andrews believes somehow in his being that what he's doing is right. So it's the same premise. There's only one difference, and I can say that Sulla actually did hand back power after he restored the Republic. The only one I know in ancient history that did so. Brutal bastard that he was, he actually stepped away voluntarily.
Right.
Daniel Andrews is no Cornelius Sulla.
No.
So that's
whoever succeeds him won't be. There'll be probably a worse version of him. So
look, the fact that you have to go back to ancient Rome to find an example of a politician who gives up power willingly is quite concerning.
It's very concerning, which is why I just felt, like everyone's used to me now, I always put a little bit of history in, but honestly, this is becoming more and more too relevant. Mm-hmm. And we can easily, it's the best place to go back to, because that's where our traditions, of course, with 3 levels of government originated from the Roman Constitution. But yeah, I was reading through this bill since yesterday, and all I could think of was, Cornelius Sulla. Wow.
It's too relevant. It's eerie how it's almost a playbook, Like they're stupid enough now. We got them dumb enough. Now they'll just paint a pretty picture and gaslight them into believing this is for their own good, for the good of the people.
Well, it is for the protection of life. That leads in nicely to part 8A, Liberty, if you want to get that up, about protection of life and public health during pandemics.
Yeah,
this is now out of control. There is absolutely no room in here, in any of it, that gives any acknowledgement to the fact we have an immune system, that we as a species have survived this long for millennia, and one of these bugs has come on with 99.97% and it's going to wipe us all out. And yet most of us are here still standing. Protection of life. That's strong language.
Yeah. That makes it sound like, it doesn't, you can't survive it. Right. That's what it makes it sound like. And so if you can't survive it, then Father Government has to come on and make sure to protect you. But like you said, we all know from millennia before, they don't give it back. And this part, I saw this part too. And I thought it was very vague again. Pandemic potential. We just keep seeing the same things over and over, and it's that is lethal. That is lethal to freedom.
Very good, very well put. It is lethal to freedom, because when it comes to health, it's my mantra: if you don't have bodily autonomy, it's game over.
Well, if you don't have autonomy, like over your body, yourself, what makes you think they're ever gonna give you even the opportunity to own private property or anything like that? Like, if they won't allow you autonomy over your body, then what else can they take from that? To me, should be the last resort. That should be the last thing and everyone should be fighting for that. It should be the last resort of them, but instead people are going along with it, right? Like, people are going along with this narrative that is for, the protection of people, of protection of life. So, no, this part in particular, I thought, and it's at the beginning.
Exactly, it's at the beginning.
It's like it just tells you exactly right there. Take it all away now.
Yeah, fast on the heels of the ongoing potential. And they are the words that I generally always I go for the words that jump out, those ones that you really do need to pay attention to. But, I think it doesn't take much for anyone to look up and see the images from the Black Plague. Now that was a plague. You walk out your front door. Now you're walking over dead bodies. You don't fire frontline health people in the middle of a so-called plague. We call it pandemic.
Right.
Why can't people see this? Common sense it's almost been stolen, hijacked. Some of us can still see it, but it's mind-blowing.
I liken it to, so I always go back to Socrates, and that's where, my basis is, and the cave, right? I always go back to the cave. To me, it's one of the most beautiful analogies ever written for free thought and how to maintain it, how to get it and how to maintain it. And just the shadows on the wall are, they're just, they've gotten more entertaining. That's the problem. They've gotten way more entertaining, and they can hold attention while we are losing attention span, those can hold our attention for longer than they used to. And so we don't have time, or we don't make time to look around. It's convenient. Like, you're sitting there and the shadows are entertaining you and you're covered from rain and you don't have to worry about it. Like, that's what they want. And that's what this is ensuring they get.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's over 2,000 years old. So we can assume that the same psyche was, the same psychological operation of people was happening, the same as it is here, over 2,000 years ago, in their Socrates and Plato's time. So I think what we ask, why is this so different? Well, it's technology. That this is like they've been able to hijack the right time for its greatest effect.
And I can't help, this is when my tin hat comes on, and I can't help but think that this has been in the works. It's just taken this long for the moment to appear. That's when my tin hat my tin hat starts to get hot, because they're not smart enough to make this up right now in 18 months. None of these people are this smart. It's been an ongoing, and then as soon as they find a vulnerability, right? So you can liken it back to wars in America. Every time we've had a bad thing, 9/11, there's always been power grabs. They're doing the same thing with COVID. And that's never going to stop. And so and it's gotten only worse now, to where now their point is they don't have to wait 20 years for another tragedy, for a pandemic, for a terrorist attack, for whatever they can. So Australia, not having a 9/11, is taking their turn. And as soon as we get the opportunity to do it, like, we're going to do it. And they are doing it to, they turned it up to 11.
Well, there is no tin foil hat conspiracy with it, CD, because what we've just discussed so far is evidence of it, that it's been in the works, because they're now bringing into law a case for ongoing infectious diseases. They will all have the potential, ongoing potential. So therefore we will be living in a perpetual state of pandemics. How do they know that? Diseases have beginnings and ends. They always do. Otherwise we'd have never been here. I keep coming back to that. I say to people, we are remarkable that we have survived as a species. As long as
Dr. Kerry Chant, the CHO or Chief Health Officer of New South Wales, said COVID's going to be here forever, and because of that, we will always have mask mandates and lockdowns. And she has a point there, because the Black Death still exists, so we'll have these diseases around forever potentially. That's why the camps are being completed in middle of next year, but they're still going to have the camps there anyway, because they know it's going to go on for more than the next few months. Even once we hit that 95% vaccination rate, which is what they're saying for reopening for New South Wales now, they're still going to have cases after that of COVID, because there was a study that came out by Bloomberg a few days ago that said that when it comes to transmissions in your own house, the vaccine does nothing. So if you have the vaccine and your partner doesn't have the vaccine, and there's COVID Delta involved, you can both transmit the disease equally likely to your children. So they've already come out and said the vaccine doesn't work for this sort of stuff. So they're going to always be ramping it up to the next level. I think for me, the really concerning thing about this section here, section 165A, is actually subsection 2. Parliament intends that in the administration of this part, any limitations on the human rights that are protected by the Charter of Human Rights should be demonstrably justified in accordance with section 7.2 of the Charter. The idea there is that they've got to justify everything in the name of safety. So there's no Bills of Rights in Australia. We have Queensland, Victoria, I think the ACT have, charters of human rights or human right acts, but they're the same level as any other statute, and they've all got built into them these provisions that say human rights can be, oppressed in the name of safety.
Right, or redefined.
Yes,
right? Like we can certainly redefine what is a human right, which is convenient, so that you can, and then you can put fluffy language in there that's like that. That's talks about human rights, and people are like, see, and then they don't ever read it past. They care about our human rights. See, it says human rights right here. I read it. It says it. They care. And how do you combat that? Okay, man. Okay, good luck.
How you combat it is what you said before, Liberty, about if the Black Plague is still with us, but most of us survived. So why do we need, that's my whole point. Humans, we're born with an immune system. That's what makes us remarkable and sets us apart. That is not acknowledged. In fact, it's taken away from us. Doesn't make sense.
We've survived the Black Death because we've built up an immunity to it. However, we're not going to be doing that for COVID because we know that the vaccine destroys antibodies.
That's right.
We know the antibody count is lower in those who have the vaccine than those who caught COVID and then recovered from it. So by relying on vaccines, not natural immunity, COVID will always be here and will still be killing us because we don't have the ability to build up those natural antibodies, like we did with, say, the Black Death.
So why aren't more people questioning the fact that we are a human being with an immune system that eventually over time will combat these things? That's what it's designed. Why would you rely on a perpetual which really is going to do more harm? This is the challenge for when you think about things. It's just the challenge. I struggle with that.
Well, to your point, people aren't questioning it because the right of the collective, of the group, is now more important than the right of the individual. And status quo is comfortable. So why would in their mind, why should they question it? Everything is good. That's the cycle of thinking that, you're right, Gerrie, that's the cycle of thinking that I wish you could break. It starts there. Why when they say, well, why should I question it? And, it's easy for us to go into, a 2-hour-long history lesson of how you've been, screwed by the state, but they don't care, and they don't want to hear that. And so
no, they don't. We all have family members, friends who have said that those very things to us. It just still doesn't, and you're right, I agree with it, and I know that is it, because they don't question. And it comes back to this, here we are back again fighting for freedom. Who would have thought, in a free society, that we've all become accustomed. So the only weakness here is the weakness in man for not looking and seeing, well, how did I actually get to have this freedom? How did I get to have this great job? How did I get to travel all over the world? Right. Oh, that's right. It's a thing called freedom. Oh, but it's always been there. No. And here we are again.
Exactly. So it's true. And people have also forgotten that the fight for freedom does not stop because tyrants don't give power back. but we forgot about that. We forgot about that tyrant part, right? Like we forgot about that part, and I think the West is so bad for that. You know, we forgot. I mean, thank God we don't remember what it, or we don't have the perception, you know, that we used to. I think we've been, you know, we've obviously had tyrants. You have a tyrant right now. You know, all of our presidents since, oh, probably all of them, you know, have been trying to acquire more power than they deserved. And that's how it goes. And so that's why you're supposed to keep fighting. You know, you're not supposed to get complacent.
That's it.
That's the part that like people have let go of as a society, right? It's not in our culture anymore to be well-read, up to date on current events, like, you know, making sure your local community is taken care of, because that's just going to be someone else's problem. Yeah. That's someone else's issue to fix. I pay taxes. That's all that matters. And so, like, you know, like as a society, we've let that disconnect just get wider and wider and wider. And now you have people that are like, well, why should I care? And that's the part that, dude, if I could change any of it, I would just change that cycle. You know?
Well, and that changing that cycle means actually taking away all the comfort creatures, because without, and we've talked about this numerous times, without a relative degree of adversity, you can't appreciate freedom. You can't appreciate, you don't have any will to fight for what is really the most important thing. But like you said, most of them don't think that. This bill reflects all of that. I read it and I'm horrified through every page, and yet other people are just going about their business. I mean, thank heavens the Victorian Bar Association are finally standing up and speaking. Although I do question that, what took them so long, because like you said earlier, CD, this was in the works. You don't become a tyrant overnight. They all have a backstory.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that one is short, and it was expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Ms. Gerrie, you had a few more points. Let's go. Give them to us.
Oh, okay. So for me, I don't. Anyone else can jump in too. We covered a bit about what the if the Premier is satisfied. We didn't probably elaborate on it, but that's scary. If the Premier is satisfied, totally open-ended, the man has proven that he's satisfied with dictating. I did find the thing on reporting to Parliament on page 18, 165 AG. Yep. I just found that weird, to be perfectly honest. Reporting must prepare a report in accordance, giving a statement of the reasons for making it, extending it, revoking it, giving a summary. I mean, all this is a moot point, isn't it? It's almost moot when you've declared yourself a dictator. You've actually eliminated the parliamentary procedures. So again, it's put in there to satisfy those people who think, oh yeah, well, they're being transparent.
Right. But they don't know how to read, so they don't understand that is just a word salad and has no value whatsoever.
Yeah. The very next section, 165 AH, allows for reports to be tabled to Parliament when they're not sitting. So they can give the report when no one's there.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a whole idea of, faking transparency so that people will buy into what they're saying. 165 AU, for example, allows the orders to be disallowed by the Acts and Regulations Scrutiny Committee. But what happens when the Scrutiny Committee is dominated by the same party that has the premiership? The Scrutiny Committee won't criticize. So currently, I think right now the Scrutiny Committee is dominated by Labor. They have the majority in that committee, so they're not going to criticize their Andrews because it's the same party.
Right.
Like this bill has been split down party lines. It's not divisive in Labor, all the Labor MPs voted for it in the lower house. You're not going to have people in Labor aren't speaking out against their own, premier. It's all, toe the party line. Don't criticize that great leader Dan Andrews.
Right. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. I'm sure you heard about it because it was an absolute national tragedy. But January 6th, something happened.
Worse than the Holocaust. Worse than the Holocaust.
Something happened, debatable. And as a result, Congress now has to come up with a committee to investigate it. Well, guess who is on that committee? People who do not like the people that participated in the January 6th happening. Okay.
Is AOC on there?
Huh?
Is AOC? Is she on the committee? AOC.
Yeah, I think probably, yeah. If not 2/3 of the squad, yeah, they're probably all, yeah. I'm sure. I don't know all of them, but they're not people that I would pick to give a fair trial to anyone ever, for this. I would not pick them as a jury member. I would immediately not. And so, but that's okay because they got picked because they're going to make sure that these people are told what they need to be told. They need to be punished. So I'm just saying that, they want to make sure that the perpetuity of authority never goes away. And in order to change this, you would then have to change language that's flowery that they put in there specifically to get public support that doesn't actually mean anything. It's just to make sure that never, that for generations of prime ministers, they can enjoy these same authority.
You're exactly right. Really, that's what it comes down to. I agree completely.
Yeah. I wish that I can wish all I want, but that's the part, where people, and it's until it's all taken away, but it's never going to be there's never going to be a day where I guess they can, like I said, they can use COVID, they can use tragedies in order to garner more power, more authority. And they will continue to create more of them so that it never actually feels like your freedoms are being taken away because it's framed like it's good for it's better for people that you don't have rights.
It's also a good.
It's a world where we're supposed to we're in a world where we're supposed to be empathetic and understanding and tolerant of everyone, no matter what. That's how all this started, right? We have to be tolerant. We have to be accepting. You can't dislike someone else for their lifestyle because it's okay, we didn't say you couldn't have your lifestyle, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. I agree you have the right to go do whatever you want to go do. That doesn't mean that I have to like it. But see, that's been taken away. And so now these people think it's the better for other people's kids. Think about other people's kids. Well, what about your kids? What about, think about other people in the workplace. Well, I work here too, but that's the part. And it's permeated into the younger generation. And you see it. I know Liberty sees it on campus. I'm sure he does. And they're ate up with it, of the group mentality, right? And I don't see that slowing down. And that's what they want, right? That's what if we can lose the idea of the individual, then communism. Woo!
That's right. And it's taken time. Again, we come back to this is not an overnight thing. This was planned to be this way. There was a direction. It took planning. They would have been knocked back here and there, and then they go forward again. So
what's the next thing, right? And it's easy if the next thing that would make a society vulnerable just never goes away and you stay vulnerable forever. And then you can just streamline, like in America, executive order, mandate, whatever flowery language you want to use for a thing that is not a law. They're going to keep doing those until they're just recognized as laws. And then, like you said, Gerrie, just completely bypass any lawmaking body and just have one person deciding what is a pandemic, what is infectious, what is,
Well, they essentially did that in a way, to some degree, at the federal level with the National Cabinet. And, that was deemed by a judge to be unconstitutional. But that's still going on. It's like, well, who cares? It's still happening. He flouted the judge's ruling. And now when Rex Patrick is trying to get the secrecy, get the papers out to public view, the latest on that, Liberty, that the Morrisons, the government lawyers are appealing that, aren't they? They've gone down another road to try to squash it again, that they never come out. Now, why? I mean, it's just a normal thing. If you don't have anything to hide, expose it. If you believe that you're ruling or governing a liberal democracy. So, therefore, that says to me, you don't believe you are governing a liberal democracy. Therefore, you know what you're doing. It becomes so sinister. And I read a piece from Sydney criminal lawyers a couple of months back where they wrote an article that said the government's federally been ruling by decree progressively over the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, it's become a lot more. So that would be equivalent to your executive orders.
And those have not, I actually did a class in college. It was really cool. And it was the evolution of the executive order. So you learn like where they started and, because this was during Obama. And so like the media coverage of the executive order ramped up. And then now, but I mean, they've been using this tool to get more power and more authority, more, especially purse power, especially economic power. That's how they've been ruling. Yes. Like this mask mandate, like this vaccine, those are not laws. You are not that's not a law. That's a strong recommendation. But that is not a law.
No.
You're not right. And so whenever you can justify that to the point to where a regular person says, oh yeah, he's doing the right thing by protecting all those people, then it just becomes accepted. And then whenever one day, no, in fact, the executive order, because the lawmaking body said it was okay, that he just makes executive orders laws now.
Mm.
So we can't call them laws, because if we call them laws, that means that a bicameral legislative branch voted on it and made it a law. So we can't call it laws, but we're gonna call it a mandate, a strong suggestion.
Guidelines.
Yeah, guidelines. Yeah, more like guidelines, But when, and that to me is when people should be like, you get thrown in jail for something you didn't even know was illegal. And then you get a lawyer and you find out, oh, well, that wasn't actually a law. That was just something that that the governor, in our language, like the governor signed this into being. And the state legislature didn't vote on it.
Which comes back to the fact that, the majority of people think it's a law. They go along with it, willingly, so easily.
Right.
Which, and we've talked more previously too about having stronger civics taught to to young children regularly, on a regular basis. But of course, that's all been squashed now too because of our whole PC environment, completely taken it over, which kind of leads in at Liberty on that. The next one, actually, 165I, when they're talking about, that's the other standout one for me, where Daniel Andrews, well, they're talking about eliminating risk, where he has a period of, it's about detention. So a period of detention specified in a pandemic order must not exceed the period that the minister believes is reasonably necessary to eliminate or reduce a serious risk to public health. Now, there is that wording again. They want, or they believe they can eliminate all risk. Life is risk. This whole bill just stinks to high heaven against everything that all of us here have been taught to value as an individual, first as an individual, then to care about your community. You can't eliminate risk from life.
No, that would, I guess that makes you God. So, here we are. We've made it. No, I also think that, so what jumps out to me, you can tell, reasonably necessary. So that is how you get the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution, where as long as it's deemed necessary and proper for the greater good, you can do it. They can do it. And Congress and eventually it led to the president now has the power to do what is reasonably necessary, or in American terms, necessary and proper. So reasonably necessary, they think reasonable is putting citizens in camps to protect public health, like as firing squads. I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but okay, you put them in a camp. And so whenever, and then you get down to conditions specified in the order set, you get into all these, reasons and conditions.
Yeah, totally open-ended. I agree with you. There are plenty of people I know who are concerned about this. You have something open-ended like that. It's not as if we don't have precedent. We are not. That's the whole thing again, if I can touch back on history, especially when I started studying history in depth, I always used to question, why do we in the modern world, although I always questioned it, generally think we are superior to earlier times, when a lot of those times produced things that showed magnificent skill and ability and to think and form and produce and create, because we're not superior. That's the trap, I believe, that most people come in. But we've all progressed. It's that word progress. In fact, Mises, who you have, von Ludwig, I remember reading last week, I think there's an article I started reading. They were talking about that, about how that word progress we should take issue with, because that makes it that way, that we think today we're so superior and we've moved on and that wouldn't happen because we know that. Well, it's not looking like that to me with this bill, because once you get to this, first it was, we're going to flatten the curve. That was nearly 2 years ago.
15 days. 15 days to flatten the curve.
15 days. I can clearly remember the day Scott Morrison stood up in front of the nation and said, just a few months, this is a little bit further on, but a few months we'll do a, really sort of sharp, hard, he didn't use the word lockdown, but then the economy will snap back, just like that, snap back. Well, that was 18 months ago.
Yeah, and meanwhile, businesses are failing left and right, and the job market's out of control, and but But yeah,
Not to
progress.
mention people's-
That's so exciting to hear you talk about Mises. That's really cool. But yes, progress is.
Well, I subscribed, so I'm subscribing now, and I'm reading some of his books. It's totally fascinating. I didn't cover him when I was doing political theory, but it feeds into everything I was doing anyway, and I read about the Enlightenment thinkers. It's just, it's fascinating. Oh, I just wish everyone would.
That's so exciting. Yes, he was definitely an incredible thinker. But yes, progress is nothing more than, a social construct.
Yes.
Progress is not progress. It's what society decide. And that can go from everything from you're not supposed to wear. At least, my mom always said you're not supposed to wear white shoes after Labor Day and until Memorial Day. Now, I don't know who follows that. At some point in society, that was a rule of social fashion. I don't care, and I think most people don't care, and that's fine. But I'm just saying that, like, at one point that was a big deal. And did we progress because we don't subscribe to silly things like that in society anymore, and dressing norms? Because the progressives would call that progressives, that we have moved away from, menial social, well, not even that, like cultural like things that make us culturally different too. Because we can't have that, because if we're culturally different, then you don't have a uniform of the masses. You have, if we still have our culture and we're divided, and we're like geographically divided by culture, in this region we do this, and in that region we do that. If you don't, oh my gosh, they take away the identity of that place and those people. Right? Like, and so in an effort to make everyone the same, and that's really what progressivism is to eventually just make everyone the same under the guise that we're for the individual. Right? And so it's always, so progressivism is nothing more than, it's a social construct.
Yes.
So if you, and this will only allow for more progressivism forever.
If forever. It's not, that's right. I know.
I just really think that now they just saw this opportunity, and it's like they went and got the blueprint for American Patriot Act, for the NSA. Like, they went and got like all of those blueprints and said, how do we get this done as fast as possible? Excuse me, so we can have the same power, and we can have, and it's like they really just took this opportunity to, and all under the guise that it's good and going to protect life.
But by protecting lives, all they've done is stopping us from living.
Right. And what kind of life?
It isn't.
Right.
It isn't life.
No. And that's the part that, right. That's the part that, it's not, sometimes it's okay to not be safe. And I always liken it back to, okay, well, like, you probably speed. You probably, like, do you do every single thing that someone recommends to you as safe and going to help you? Probably not.
That's right.
We wouldn't live, or we just stay at home.
Yeah.
Right? And so by taking away living for the sake of saving lives, that again, you are taking away the individual.
That's it.
And this is just stripping of individual freedom. And I know we talk about that all the time, but every time they come out with a new part, with a new amendment, with a new, like it's scary. And they're getting more blatant with it. Like they're being lazy with the language, in my opinion, because any thinking person could read this and see that. And they're getting sloppy, and they're transparent with their untransparency.
Because they're getting away with it. They're being enabled. The people are the enablers. Comes down to that. They're nothing without the enablers.
Yeah. And what you don't want, or maybe what you do want, I go back and forth on it. For individuals, for those same individuals who are for the collective and for the betterment of the group, no longer have what little individual rights they thought they had, and then it will be way too late. And then it'll be the Hunger Games, but on an international level with Zoom.
Yeah. It's that saying on the precipice. On the precipice. Can we touch on 165BE? Because that's an interesting.
I just want to finish this section. I want to go through, what on the subsection 2, what it allows for a pandemic order to include. Just while we're on this section still, so a pandemic order includes detaining people, which is paragraph A. Paragraph B is again more about detaining people for an extended period of time. Then paragraph C restricts movement or requires movement, which means they can forcibly move you around if they need to.
Yeah.
And that's similar to paragraph D, which requires movement into or from a pandemic management area. So again, they can move you around, and that means they can move people into pandemic management areas that include camps. But in theory, if they call the camp, a pandemic management area, they can then forcibly move people into that camp. In theory,
right.
Then we've also got prohibiting or regulating gatherings in both public and private. So again, the government can regulate your private life as much as it wants to. Required the use of PPE, so mask mandates are again made legal under this bill. Limiting the carrying out of businesses, activities, or undertakings. So again, they can shut the economy down. Or, and this is probably my least favorite one, paragraph I requires you to provide information and documents to the government if at their request. So at the government's request, you have to hand over information. And it doesn't specify what the information relates to, but it includes information about the identity of any person, which could mean checkpoints.
Yeah, that's exactly what that sounds like.
And then finally, you've got 2 paragraph J's because the government made a spelling error. You've got a paragraph J at the bottom of page 21 and at the top of page 22, 2 paragraph J's for basically forced testing of people. So you can mandate COVID tests. And I think all of those are very alarming.
Yeah, you're right.
And of course, it says include, so it's not limited to these provisions. They're just examples of what the government can do under this bill.
And those are subject to change too. Like that's they're just guidelines for how to be a dictator. I think so too. I think you're right, Liberty. That's limiting movement. So I mean, they've already done that, right? But literally just saying, okay, we're not going to take you to jail, but you can't stay here in your house because you are not safe. Because somebody said that. Because somebody said you're not safe in your house. So you now have to come to our house with a bunch of other unsafe people so that we can keep you and other people safe.
And that falls into that whole until the Premier deems it that you're reasonable, that you're not reasonably unsafe for the community. Well, when does that end? When's the end point? 4 years? Because, again, this is going to be an ongoing, potentially ongoing, forever living with it. Well, yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Are they ever getting out of there when they go in?
They're not in jail, so
But if they're in a camp,
they're voluntarily.
Yeah.
Right? Can they get in their and then if you're talking about something that's can be spread between people that, so the threat isn't like a murderer. It's not like a one person, right? So it could be anybody. So everyone's a boogeyman, which means that while you're not in jail, which means you came here voluntarily, we cannot allow you to see your family because they could be a danger to all these other, no. And the language for vaccinated, fully vaccinated, will never be defined permanently. Because what is a fully vaccinated person? They still haven't defined that.
Well,
this just leads to more language.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them define it.
Which then begs the question of where's the end point for any of this? So how big do the camps get? Or what happens to the people? How many more people are going? Again, premised on the whole, in the beginning, that this is an ongoing pandemic. Ongoing, so it's permanent. So, it raises all these sort of questions.
It doesn't end until the government...
It never ends. It never ends. It won't end until liberty is restored. That's if you look at history, it's this will never be handed back.
No, it will have.
It won't be watered down.
Back, and I don't know if we've got. I think we're a little behind. I think if people really got upset today and really wanted to do something, we're a generation behind anyone caring enough to do anything, right? So, eventually there would be a second generation of people that said, wait a minute, it didn't have to be this way. I don't want it to be this way anymore. By God, we're going to take it back or whatever, whatever. But you get what I'm saying? It takes generations of people to be uncomfortable for that to ignite.
That's right.
And just like this didn't happen overnight, taking it back doesn't happen overnight.
No.
But people will like I said, I think they're just too comfortable. And people like status quo, people like to just be average. People enjoy that. And that is fine, but that has led to complacency, that's led to social, unawareness. Completely, unaware, and that's how they want it.
Except it's not. Yeah, that's right. Except it's not fine when it impacts on somebody else's life who wants to have a choice. It is again. We see the weakness of the human, and here we are once again back fighting for our basic human rights. So, how can we stand by as a society and applaud the fact, oh, look at us, we're modern, we've progressed, we're so much better than, 1,000 years ago or even 500 years ago or, heaven forbid, 3,000, 4,000 years ago when, well, actually, no, because, they were pretty smart. They discovered the stars, the universe, the Persians with mathematics and law code, Hammurabi's law code.
What is progress, right? I guess
Exactly.
how we conduct war, right? I guess we don't conduct war like we used to. We just bomb people. So like that is considered progression. You're still killing people.
Yeah.
Like however you wanna do it, it's still happening. But that's labeled as progressive. So, and anytime like this bill with bi-party support, anything with bi-party support is scary. They should not agree. That's the point.
Well, the Liberals, the opposition aren't agreeing. It's getting through from the crossbenchers. Is that right, Liberty?
Oh yeah.
So the Greens, who are the biggest minor party, have voted with the government in the lower house for this bill. The Independents, I think, voted with the Liberal. There are 3 Independents, 3 Greens. I'm pretty sure most of the Independents voted with the Liberals against this bill. In the upper house, though, it'll get through because of the crossbench. Because of the Animal Justice Party, the Greens, and the Recent Party, Fiona Patton. So they've each got 1 senator in the upper house, and if they helped the government draft this bill, and between them, so there's 40 senators in the upper house. Dan Andrews' government has 18, but one of those is the speaker. So and they can only vote to basically be a tiebreaker. Same with the vice presidents in the US system. So that basically means it's 17 plus 3 crossbenchers is 20 against 19, so the bill passes.
I shake my head at the name of the Reason Party.
Supposedly, they're meant to be libertarian. They're not.
Wow, yeah, you could have fooled me.
Did they read the platform? Did they read it? Because I don't think that's on there.
That's it.
I don't think
Fiona Patton, who's meant to be libertarian, sold her vote to back this bill in return for Labor backing her bill to decriminalise and regulate the sex workers in Victoria. Which by itself is not inherently bad, but the fact is that the way it's being done means that sex workers have complained about what she's doing for them. They said, we'd rather it be like it was before than how it's going to be now. Because they're basically forcing all the sex workers to be out in the industrial areas of the town. Which is ridiculous.
You can't bargain your way out of freedom.
No.
And that's where the whole system is just wrong. It's broken. Maybe it was, whether there was a point of time where it worked, maybe here and there, or when they designed it, they probably definitely intended it in both our country and your country, but it's not working. You can't bargain for freedom. Just...
No. And thinking that government is just going to make something that it doesn't want legal with no contention just is ridiculous. And she sold out for nothing, because now these poor women and men will be, it didn't make it any safer. That's the whole point of legalizing sex work, is so that it is safer.
Yeah, that's it.
And that didn't make it safer at all. But it's going to be presented to people like, like the government is these women, they went and helped them fallen women, and they helped them, and now it's all better, and it's only made it worse. It's only made it so much worse.
Excuse me for a minute.
So we've passed the 1 hour mark. I think there are 3 sections left to cover. When Gerrie goes back, we'll cover. Oh, Gerrie's back. Okay, I think we'll cover your section first. Section 165BE. If you want to cover that one first, and then I've got 2 more ones before we finish up.
That one, because it actually ties in with what we were just speaking about, where is it again? It was about, I've lost it.
It's up on the screen right now for you. So to avoid that,
it was about, they talked about quarantining and isolation is not the same as being detained. So that one was, I was just going to get you to, maybe we could just talk about it, explain that. I was reading it and thinking, what are they getting at here? I mean, it seems clear that they're, well, to me, the way I'm reading it is that, yeah, that's not the same. You're actually going to be taken off to a camp. Am I right in reading it like that? Or you're going, yeah.
So my understanding of that section there is it deals with the definition of being detained. And it says that merely because you are, in isolation or quarantine, because the government made you be in isolation or quarantine, does not mean that you're actually legally detained.
So that would mean then if they want, so they may deem you being isolated or in quarantine not enough. So then they can walk in and detain you. Again, basing it on a premise of what the Premier or the relevant authority who's given the power to do this decides.
No, so what this is was it Division 6, I think? Division 6, and it deals with, what is detention? What does detention mean for the purposes of the Health Act? So that section 165 BE just discusses, what it means to be detained and the fact that, just because you're in quarantine does not mean that you are detained. And then the rest of the section talks about, for example, 165 BI talks about, that the when you are detained, they have to give you the reasons for being detained. But under BE, just because you are in quarantine does not mean that you are detained. So it means that the government doesn't have to explain the reason to you just because you're in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically the government, it's basically, to use a US example, the Miranda rights. The government does not need to read you your Miranda rights merely because you're in quarantine or in isolation, because that's not necessarily being detained.
Right, because you didn't break a law.
Yeah.
Because it all goes back to, decrees, not laws. And so if they only detain you, and they like you said, they read you your Miranda rights, so so you're not getting arrested, but we're going to read you these Miranda rights as if you are being arrested, but you're not. Yeah. But you are you have been deemed a hazard to people, so we have to babysit you until we decide that you are not. But you are not being arrested.
Yeah, basically. So basically, it's saying that being in quarantine is not the same as being arrested or being detained. So it means the government has to give you, because there are certain requirements to meet if you're detained. They have to give you certain treatment.
Right.
But that 165 BE basically says that, well, you don't have to be given that treatment because you're in isolation. That's not being detained, which is, quite alarming, because it means, well, what does it mean by being detained then? If isolation is not being detained, does it mean being arrested only then?
And that's my point. That was why it stuck out to me. That was the whole reason. And
then, of course, does quarantine camp count as being detained or not? So if you're in quarantine camp, does that count as being in quarantine, or is that a separate issue?
That's it. So, I mean, is the day going to come when quarantining at home will just not be allowed? So,
right.
That's the whole thing. Why they're building these things. I mean, we still don't really have an answer. The Premier up here in Queensland was interviewed saying that they were for the unvaccinated. Now, that's open-ended. What unvaccinated? The ones coming into the country? The people here who aren't? Again, Mm.
That's I mean, in a place where you have vaccination rates, that are through the roof, right? So they're gonna know the one person in the house that isn't vaccinated, and then because they're a danger for this cold, now they can just be indefinitely quarantined because
That's
they
right.
are a risk by not being vaccinated.
That's right.
And so until you either comply or until you comply, you have to be quarantined.
But then, like you said earlier, at what point do you become fully vaccinated? Because there's enough reports around to say that the immunity is waning. You're relying on booster shots. In fact, I think I've heard a couple of our premiers say booster shots will be here, part of our yearly thing. So then what if people don't keep up with their boosters? Are they not considered fully vaccinated? So are they shipped off? I mean, how many of these things are they going to build?
Well, you and I covered the reopening of New South Wales a couple of weeks ago, and like I said then, that under the health orders, it talks about you have to be fully vaccinated to get your freedoms back, but does not define what it means to be fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't get your booster, let's say, Gerrie, let's say you miss a booster. And let's say you've gone along with this whole thing and you have no problem getting boosters. Like you just missed your day or whatever. Okay. So then little old, Granny, who we were told we were going to kill, who survived all of this, is going to get taken away. She's going to be fined $5,000 because she didn't go, and it's either pay the $5,000 or be voluntarily quarantined. I mean, and then so you give her the booster. I don't know, like to me, okay, they can then decide what that means and how what is your transmission rate, on that, and how long you have to wait for that to work. And then it just seems like a way to keep people quarantined beyond any measure. It's just like a suspension of habeas corpus. That's what this says to me. Like this says
Basically
that it's okay to just hold people,
Which goes back to what we started with, the potential ongoing potential that feeds into that, which is never ending. This is never going to end. It will never end.
I'm here.
And don't these people who make all these, I mean, you read all of this, the people that are putting all this together, don't they get exhausted? Don't they just get exhausted?
I often think that, do you ever take a day off of not trying to ruin people's lives?
Exactly. Trying to think of ways to make people's lives hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the poem written, I forget the guy's name, but it was about, I didn't speak up for the socialists or didn't speak up for the people, and then they came, didn't speak up for them and didn't speak up for them, and then there was no one left and no one to speak up for me, and they came for me. I forget the wording. I should memorize that.
No, that's it. I mean, you got it. And it's real.
So real.
It's so real. And when we talk to people like that and we use that analogy, they truly cannot comprehend. I really don't think that they can comprehend how far it can go. And I think they're scared. A lot of that's fear, right? They don't want to know how far it can go, how far it can reach, because that's scary. People don't like to be scared.
No, they don't.
But that's the point, is that it is scary. And no, this isn't going to just happen. This isn't going to happen in 3 generations. This is going to happen in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
it's
And yes, it is mind blowing, and we're seeing it play out. Who would have thought I mean, not everybody lives to see such a big turning point in history, which is what this would, if we ever get to write about it, if we're allowed to preserve what we write about it, it's considered a turning point in history. In my view, I think it's the greatest turning point in history. Well, actually, after, Christ's birth, for people who of faith, that is the biggest moment. But turning point as far as the world, the calamity of this. It's amazing.
I agree.
So there are two more parts to this bill. I want to cover this briefly.
Cool.
The first one is section 165A-K. And one very particular part of that, and the subsection 3, paragraph D, I'll pull that one very quickly. This is probably one of the most concerning parts of this bill. The government can basically discriminate against you based on your characteristics, attributes, or circumstances. And then under subsection 4, there is an exception. This does not, the Equal Opportunity Act does not apply here. So that act is all about anti-discrimination laws, and you can't discriminate in the workplace and stuff like that. Except section 75(1)(b) of that act says there's an exception for government orders, and this bill says that applies. So they can discriminate against you based on any characteristic covered in that bill, covered in that act, and it's legal. The legal discrimination against you for whatever they want.
Yeah, this is definitely the most concerning part of it. It tramples on everything that we as human beings, as individuals, as free-born men and women, it's disgusting. It's just utterly disgusting.
So we've seen this bill already abrogate the rights covered under the Human Rights Charter, and now they're also saying that the anti-discrimination law doesn't apply here either. So all that stuff about your rights means nothing.
Right.
The government can legally, discriminate against you because, you're male, female, LGBT,
well, they won't do any of that.
Anything.
They're not gonna get into that. It's specifically so that they can pass this, and then you can't sue them and take it up to high court for discrimination based on vaccination status, because all they have to do is add vaccination status to the Equal Opportunity Act of 2010, and they will. It'll be in some big bill that they pass, and there's an amendment, and then once that's done, now you can't sue the government for discrimination. And that's discrimination. Okay.
Does it, would that cover disability too? Like especially people with physical and very high impairment?
I believe so. I can check that act now, see what it covers, but I believe so.
Ours does. And then you have the American Disabilities Act, which went into but that one wasn't really about employment. But yeah, equal opportunity does extend out to disabled people.
So that would make their rights null and void as well under this.
Yeah.
You can't use disability as an argument. So, for example, if they put in place a vaccine mandate, and you can't get the vaccine because you're disabled, the government can say, "So what? It's a mandate." So if you can't get the mandate if you can't take the vaccine for health reasons, the government can say, "Well, so what? Like, you can't stop us from doing this. Like, you now can't, even though you can't take the vaccine, you don't have the rights. You don't have an exception. again, religious exception doesn't exist. There are no exemptions and exceptions to the mandate.
Right. Which are not laws.
So you have a
Well, they're laws, so they're regulations under the Act. So they do count as actual laws in Australia, at least. Which is, bureaucrats can make laws. They're not as important. They're not in the hierarchy of laws. They're not equal to an act, but they still are legally enforceable in the court. And it means you have bureaucrats making laws who aren't elected.
Right. Yeah.
And you also have the Premier making basically the Premier can make executive orders as well now under this. It's basically the exact same thing as making an executive order when it comes to COVID.
Yeah.
So, Liberty, a question then, when a state, this passes and he gets to have all this power, and every human right is stripped away, even from our most vulnerable, how does that work in our case as a federation? How does it play into that?
I'm
you're
currently
talking about a state that's a communist, where Australia, liberal democracy, and now one state's become a leg of some of the worst dictatorships in the world.
So under Section 51, the government, the federal government has the power to create quarantine laws. However, Section 51 laws both the state and federal governments can pass laws on that. If it's caught under Section 52, it's only the Commonwealth government that can make laws on it. But under Section 51, if the state law and federal law is inconsistent, then the federal law applies. But if there's no federal law on the matter, then the state law applies. So quarantine is subsection 9, I believe, could be 10, of Section 51. And so that means that if Scott Morrison was to, put a bill to Parliament to say that you can't discriminate against people when it comes to quarantine on the basis of any characteristic, and that passed, then this part of the current bill we're discussing right now, that part wouldn't apply. But unless Scott Morrison and the federal LND pass a bill that relates to quarantine, this applies.
So, from a humanitarian point of view, he should do that. The federal government should enact a bill to override this.
Correct. They should. Even saying with amend the 1975 Racial Discrimination Act and say to that you can't discriminate when it comes to health orders, whether they pass their own bill or they amend an existing bill on the matter of discrimination, but they have to do something to stop this federally. Otherwise, then Andrews can do whatever he wants. Except we've seen from Scott Morrison that the only time he steps in has been when Patriot wanted to open up more than Scott Morrison wanted. So Scott Morrison did not stop Palaszczuk or McGowan or Andrews, but as soon as Palaszczuk says, well, we need to reopen New South Wales internationally fully, Scott Morrison says, no, you can't do that. So he won't intervene against tyranny. He will intervene against people trying to not have tyranny, basically.
Right. It's all up to protect the power.
Yes, basically.
It's all to make sure that, no, you do not get to, don't read it. In fact, don't read it. Don't read any of it. Don't pay attention. Just know that it's for the protection of lives.
So for a so-called self-labeled, so-called God-fearing Prime Minister of the nation, one would think that that's what he would want to do. You couldn't possibly support this level of tyranny in one of the states.
No.
Now, I can't imagine the majority of people not wanting anything other than that.
Right.
So um, yeah, it's horrific to me. And I often really do bring it back to the leader of the nation. I mean, he's out there now gallivanting around the globe, at Glasgow and in Rome, representing the country, the nation. And while that's happening, one of the states has turned itself in to a tyranny, a tyrannical regime.
Yeah, and
people just don't know the seriousness. They're not waking up to the seriousness of this.
And Dan Andrews he's so confident, he's so sure of himself that this bill will pass, that Dan Andrews, he didn't even turn up. Dan didn't turn up to Parliament to even vote on it. He was that certain that it would pass. He didn't even turn up to vote for the bill. All he did is he made his opinion. So he put his opinion to the speaker or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he said, "My opinion is that it should pass." That's all he could do. He can't vote from, distance. So he didn't even turn up on Thursday to vote for it because he knew it would pass. Because politicians, they don't care about the people; they care about the power.
Yeah, I'm talking. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to from a moral standpoint, from the leader of this country. Where's the moral compass here? Because I'm not seeing a skerrick of it.
Well, he's a baby lizard person, so he doesn't have one. He's for sure, in training. And like you said, supposedly God-fearing. Well, the only thing they fear is losing their power. That's the only thing they fear. I'm sure at one point in his life he was a God-fearing man. I'll give him that. I'm sure at one point in time. But from what we can see now, that whole do unto others thing really gone out the window, and now it's just about maintaining power. And like I said, they really are just using this event as, as a full speed ahead. And that to me is so great. Like so much of this legislation that's come through in this session, would have probably taken a lot longer in the States. It would have taken several sessions to go through. And the fact that this is they're just mowing over people. And if you disagree, then the state prime minister comes down on you and no, get in line. It's truly remarkable.
It reminds me of that quote from Nancy Pelosi: "We have to pass the bill so that we know what's in it."
Right.
Right. It's basically the exact same logic.
So just stuff it full of legal jargon. Put words in it. We're getting paid to put words in it, and no one can read this. No one will have time to read this, and it's engineered that way. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, he's a big proponent of releasing this information on how it goes in America, and how he'll post pictures of bills that are this big in a binder, and he's like, I've got this big team of people and 72 hours or less to read it, digest it. Then I guess we're going to talk about it, or hopefully, or not. And then, and so that's what they're doing. They took a page from our playbook, and it's working because it works. And which, is propaganda. They figured it out. They figured it out. And it's amazing all this legislation's gotten through, this session. It's crazy.
That is. So is it safe to say that this is the moment that Australia lost its humanity?
Yeah. This bill is basically guaranteed that this bill will pass the upper house unless a Labor MP votes against it. It will pass the upper house. Mm. And then if that happens, then mass exodus, people will have to leave Victoria. We're already seeing people leaving Australia. Last live stream, we had a guy on who was talking about, hey, he's moving his family to Central America. I since know the second guy who's doing that. People, packing up and leaving the country because you can get out if you're leaving for more than 3 months, you can get a one-way ticket to get out of Australia. So all these people are leaving now before this bill passes because it comes into effect December the 1st if it passes.
Yes, well, I know several people personally who are leaving. Not the country, though. They're just moving up north there. Not everyone can leave the country. It's not that easy. But can they still get out without a vaccination? Leaving the country?
Right now, but that will change.
So, going back to people leaving, I've thought about this often. At what point does this become, like you said, Gerrie, a humanitarian crisis? And I've said this before, that if it was happening to a place where the West had oil assets, this would have already been called a humanitarian crisis. So, like, when it happens eventually, and people say, oh, no, I got to get out of here. We got to get the hell out. And it starts to look like, Cuba. Then who's going to take the Australia? Like, who's going to take them? And because at that point, they can just say amnesty and they come wherever they go. And who's going to take care of them? Someone has to foot the bill and that is, I'm not saying it would be like this mass exodus or whatever that people, but still, that's an influx of people that you're now responsible for. Because it's not like they're just moving and they got an apartment, they got it all figured out. They just show up, and then when they figure out they can do that and how to do that, I think you're going to see a big influx of Australians that will be scattered all over the world. And that's what a sight, I guess. Usually we're used to seeing a certain image whenever we're fighting. We talk about tyrants and dictators, right?
Yeah.
And it's English speaking people having to run from their tyrannical government. Like, that is, to me, at that point, that's when people should be like, okay, if the Australians have had enough, then we should probably get on board. That's when I really think, when they start to really leave.
I think at this stage, it's Victorians. I'd say the bulk of them are moving to other states. Mm-hmm. Probably not Western Australia anymore, since that tyrant over there announced nobody can get in. No one can come in there now unless they're double jabbed. Queensland and New South Wales. I've heard a few Tasmanians to go to Tasmania. Yeah. It is, it's disgusting.
And then you're going to ruin that economy of Victoria. There's people.
I believe it already is.
I mean, but it's never going to come back.
Correct.
Like, it will never. There's no. It's not like a natural disaster where people were displaced and then eventually they're going to come back. They're never going to come back. So. How do you?
So the people, and the people who support this or won't pay attention and take it seriously, I mean, what do they think is going to happen? How do they think this is going to end?
Because
that is what I ask.
I don't know what and I think they're scared to think about how it ends.
And that's it. That they're scared.
So scared.
If you have to actually ask yourself, what's the government doing? Really, are they doing something that actually is not in my interest? That means they're going to have to ask a lot of other questions about what else they've done that haven't been in their interests. And yeah, most people don't want to do it. It's too hard.
No,
Go ahead. I've got one more part to discuss.
Oh.
Unless you want to say something.
No, go ahead.
So this is the punishment for not complying.
Mm.
So if there is a pandemic order that's made and you don't comply, and your non-compliance means that you are likely to cause serious risk to the health of another person, which means that not having the vaccine could cause a serious risk of health to another person, the punishment is 500 penalty units, which is around $90,000, 67,000 US, or 2 years behind bars. So looking at least a year's wage for most people for non-compliance.
So when they take you to jail, they vaccinate you?
I don't know that, but
I'm just saying, like, then you're going to be into a population of people, and the whole point is to not have a bunch of people all together, and so,
yeah, that's right, and that's fair enough to ask. Yeah,
oh, too bad, so sad, and then it's like, okay, well, I was in here because I didn't want to comply, but now I'm around a bunch of people, and I'm not like.
Yeah.
I know. I've thought the same thing. It's the whole thing is so open-ended. But so what's the next step with this? The Victorian Bar Association are all up in arms. How many penned their name to an open letter? 26?
20. So last I heard, that was from Friday. It was 26. 23 of them QCs, which Queen's Counsel, the highest ranking lawyers in the land, have signed the open letter to Dan Andrews condemning the bill, including the head of the QC, the head of the Victorian Bar, who's a QC. Is one of the. I'm pretty sure she's one of those. She's criticized it.
They pass it. It goes through next week. Whatever is it? Next week they're voting the upper house.
It'd be next 2 weeks is when all.
Next 2 weeks that goes through. What can be done other than waiting for an election to vote him out? But there's concerns that he has the power to delay elections or call or stop them. So what is their? What are their plans? What would they do? What can they do?
Fight it. The best thing they can do is, we have lawyers now at least, so fight it in court. If you get fined for, whatever reason, fight it in court. Say that it's not actually, it's not necessary for safety under the Human Rights Charter. So argue that it's like under the Human Rights Charter, it's not what they've done for that individual person. It's not necessary for safety. I reckon that's the best argument you can make is, go through the courts with those lawyers. Because we have the lawyers now who can fight it, which we didn't have in the past, but we now have the people who can help us, hopefully get that through the courts and make it clear that it's not needed for your safety, and hopefully get action done that way, or we're trying to make sure that the federal government does something about it.
Well, given that we just discussed how flimsy our human rights are not ours, as the Victorians are under this bill. I don't have much hope in that, given the justice system, it takes a while to get going. I would think that the onus lays fairly and squarely with the federal government to put something together.
Well, you and I are at risk as well. So for all the other states, they've got 2 houses. The lower house is always controlled by the government. The upper house is often you need the crossbench. As generally speaking, both at a federal and state level, you need the crossbench to pass stuff in the upper house. However, Queensland only has 1 house of parliament, the lower house, which I guess is the 1 house, not the lower house, House of Reps. So the government controls that, so they can put that through. In our Human Rights Act that was passed in 2019 has the exact same safety provision, so they can pass that in Queensland whenever they want to. So you and I will potentially suffering the same fate, Gerrie, as the Victorians are if Palace decides to do the exact same thing, because we've got no defence against it because our Human Rights Act is the exact same as the Charter in Victoria.
I think you'd see a lot of people from southeast Queensland very quickly scurrying up to the north because I halfway. So, Liberty, what would Queensland be in relative terms to in the States for something like this? Because Queensland, they say anything up past a bit above the Sunshine Coast, which is still considered southeast Queensland. Once you get up there and further, the talk is they really don't buy into this. You know, they're very sensible, hard-living people. Plus it's hot. It's so. What would the equivalent be in the US? A state equivalent?
New York. The southeast corner is New York City. The rest of the state of New York is pretty red, pretty Republican, and it's the same in Queensland. Although I guess Labor has control in Mackay and either Cairns or Townsville. They've got control there, but the rest of the state is pretty much.
Yeah, they don't take time to hands. Far north Queensland. Anyway, yeah, that's where they go.
One of those
going up north.
It might have been Townsville then. One of those two cities voted strongly for Labor, but that's because the Liberals wanted to do curfews for the Indigenous people because they thought the Indigenous people were committing all the crimes. So it's more of a racist issue, just the way they voted Labor. But up north and west is pretty conservative. As I said before, where I am is basically conservative stronghold. So the best comparison is probably New York State.
Yeah,
okay. So that's where we'll be scurrying up to.
Oh man!
Good grief!
That can you argue that part of this bill? Do you think that could make it up there where punishment could be, redefined? I feel like that if there was any case that could go up, it would be that. It would be that, this punishment doesn't fit this crime.
Yeah, that'd be it. Proportionality would be a good argument to make.
And, years worth of, what people make, and they're not making any money right now. So, and then again, okay, so they take you to jail or quarantine, and then what? And then so all the unvaccinated, so then they're not going to vaccinate you. They're not going to force you into it. You just have to live here now with these people. I mean, and then it's like, okay, well, so if you agreed to get vaccinated, how many boosters do you have to have before they'll release you? Right? Let's say you put your hands up and you were like, you know what? I'm going to get vaccinated. I'm done living here. I want to go back. Okay. Because people will do that.
Yeah.
How long until that person can leave the camp? Because fully vaccinated is a moving goalpost that I can't even see anymore. I don't even. It's so far that way. I don't even see it. So I think that's a really good case. If the bar association could get anything done, that it doesn't fit the crime. 10 years? Is that how long it's going to take for the pandemic to not be a pandemic? I mean, what kind
It'll be here forever. Remember, it'll be here forever.
It's ongoing. Remember, it's an ongoing potential.
So what the basis is that punishment? Because if it's ongoing and you have to go to jail for up to 10 years, okay, well, let's say you don't get vaccinated in 10 years.
I know. It's just...
Then you go back,
No, sorry, it was 2 years behind bars.
Oh, 2 years. Oh, I thought you said 10. Okay,
no, sorry.
Still.
Could be the Aussie accent.
I'm normally I'm normally better than that. I'm sorry. But still, 2 years. Okay. So you get out in 2 years. Do you go back because you don't want to get vaccinated?
Possibly, yeah. You do risk going back, and that's how they get you. That's how we get the numbers up for the vaccine, because you go to prison for 2 years. All the people with you got young kids, cool. If you don't comply, you go to prison for 2 years. You don't get to see your kids for 2 years. suck it up and deal with it. You have to get the vaccine. That's how you get compliance.
Yeah,
because that risk will force people to get the vaccine. You'll have no choice.
Well, they're literally pointing a gun at people to get them to do it. You know, like literally bullet, like a gun to your head. You know, you can keep going. I mean, that's when I love people that are like, oh, you have a choice. So the choice is do this, something I don't want to do, or go to jail.
That's no choice.
That's not a choice. That is not a choice. That is condemning your life to, you know, nothing for 2 years.
Yeah.
And again, it's imperfect.
So how is this going to all end? When you two are talking, I'm remembering the past episodes in history where there was always someone came in to rescue the fallen. Given that this playbook, and it is a playbook, is going all through every Western nation, who's riding in on the white horse?
I wish I knew. It's a million-dollar question.
I can't help it. I mean, honestly, they should just everyone should go back and read the Gulag Archipelago for a start. That's number one.
That's good.
I have that by my bedside with all the other books on road. But, I mean, people I know joke about, we're going to start the Gulag parties. It's not funny because it isn't funny. It is actually, we make pride of it.
It's funny whenever it's, you know, it could be reality, but it's too far away from reality. You know, that's whenever it's.
But it once was reality.
Building them in your backyard.
It once was reality. That's the thing. There's precedent for this. I tell people, I say, don't be ridiculous. That'll never happen. There's precedent for this. It happened. It happened. And given that humans don't change, because we're sitting here looking at this bill, this is real. I actually printed this whole damn thing out and went through it. I mean, it's real.
And no, it's not funny, and it's really not funny anymore. And you know, I just I foresee people eventually, just not getting boosters anymore, right? You know, just being like, I don't, you know, something bad happens to somebody that they know, and they're like, I'm not going to get that.
Well, that already is happening. You just won't see it on the mainstream news. I mean, there's not a person I don't know in my circle, not that it's particularly big or anything, and then from people they know who actually don't know someone who's had something go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't hear about that.
No, the Guardian likes to
talk it actually has to
about the one person that died from COVID in Australia. You know, like the one person in 3 months that died.
Yeah, that was the federal government when it first all happened. Yeah. And they said, well, you know, it's not going to happen on our watch. You know, no life, every life's important, which it is, of course it is. But, well, what about all the lives? There is a senator here at the moment, and he's in Queensland actually, and he's in the government, and he's not holding back on all the stories he's publishing. I don't know whether you've seen them, Liberty, but he's putting them out daily now. There's no way this can be ignored much longer. It's going to get out further and further because he is putting stories out. People have just gone to him in desperation. And I've been reading a few. Some of them are absolutely heartbreaking. And he's just putting the whole, it's a wonder Facebook still keep him on there.
Well, it will eventually, it will work. And the more you can play that and not the family of the one person that died over and over and over, you know, and you can play that over and over.
Yeah.
People will, huh? Did you hear that? You know, and you know, people watch the news, they just wah 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 wah, and then something, you know, snazzy or scandalous, and wait, did you hear that? Did you know that? You know, and so I think the more you can put that out, the better.
Well, even doing the podcast with you, and Liberty does others, various ones as well. I did one the other day with Roads to Liberty. It's getting out there. And I think that's good for us. We're grateful for all the support. I mean, we're all doing our bit. It's just a little bit. We all have our role to play. And it has to eventually make a difference. Because this horrendous piece of legislation or piece of this bill, which is just abominable.
Yes, it is. It is.
Anyway, it's almost 2 hours.
I'm sorry.
That's great.
It happens every time.
It was good.
You're not welcome back on.
I know. I'm never getting back on. I'm sorry. I tried.
But we covered, that was great. We covered a lot. We had good discussion on that, on the bill.
I'll let you two rant for another hour. I'll be back in an hour's time to finish up.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's all good talking, but very productive.
It was very productive.
You know,
yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot.
There is a lot to unpack, and it's we are in strife down here, and it's good that it gets out through various mediums around the world.
I agree.
Yeah.
If we'll talk about it, who will? And if 15 people, if it's 15 people, 1,500 people, that's more people that know. Yeah,
that's right. Very good.
Yes, wow. But I'm so glad we were able to do it. This is awesome.
Yes.
Yes, it was really good. Thank you both.
Yes.
Anything else to plug before we finish up?
Read the Gulag Archipelago.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a good plug. That's a great plug for sure. I'm on Twitter at Lady ANCAP. Y'all come follow me and wish me happy birthday.
Happy birthday for the rest of what is left of it, and a great year.
Yes.
Great year.
Eat Halloween candy and watch scary movies.
Yes.
Yes. So I wouldn't have missed this for the world. I would not have missed this for the world.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have been here.
We're happy to have you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I really
thank you for all your support. For all of us in Australia. Yeah. It all helps.
We're with you, and I think about you anytime I get to go do something. Anything. I think about you all the time and think how, just go into the grocery store whenever I want to. Little things like that. I try and remember you guys, because I know I cannot imagine. So we just keep going.
We have to. We must.
Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you. I'll finish the stream off now for us.
Okay.